Two guys, two beers, two mics, one purpose. To deliver two opinions nobody asked for. Two opinions you never knew you needed until now. This is Scribbler to Scribe.
We got to welcome everybody to another episode of Scribbler to Scribe, where we are stuck in a virtual environment. Ronnie's floating around our beer because we're ready to crack into this. So we're not letting, Omicron take away our drinking time.
It's Omicron.
Yeah, Omicron. So this week it's going to be inverted maybe on the camera if you can see this, but we're trying St. Bernadus Wit. So say a little bit about the beer. So the Wit is part of the St. Bernadus brewery line. So they are an Abbey beer. The brewery or the monastery where this came from was founded in the late 19th century. And it looks like essentially the abbey where this was located was originally used to make cheese, and then was displaced. And so I think some of the monks who worked there or worked the monastery or moved around. I don't believe that St. Bernadus is part of the true Belgian Trappist beers. So today it's not made by monks, but it follows very similar style. So the Wit is actually one of the lighter beers. It's only 5.5%. So this one's going to be a little different than what we've done in the past. We've usually been drinking beers that have been quite a bit stronger. So I'm kind of excited to see what we think on the scale of 1 to Martin Luther about this one. I hear good things. I know that the St. Bernadus, I don't know how you say the ABT. It says ABT 12. So I call it about, or maybe my maritimer about 12. But I've had that one. It is an excellent beer. We'll try that later on. I don't want to give too much away. But for this week, we'll try the Wit. So I think you've already cracked it open. I gotta crack mine. Oh, you brought a glass. Good.
It's got a very fruity bouquet so far.
Oh, bouquet. Right. Is it Valentine's Day?
Almost citrusy.
I guess I'm too far down here. I don't want to spill it all over my keyboard here. Yeah, it's got a good look to it.
It's got a good amount of fizz.
Yeah, it's not as flat as a lot of the other beers we've had. So
it's can't really tell from this angle. It looks darker on the screen, but it's almost like a blonde.
That's good. I like it. That's refreshing. I just exercised before this, so lifting some weights. Managed to injure myself. It's all good.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, typical Monday night. No, not seriously, but just tweak something. Just doesn't feel very good anymore. But
sorry to hear. And yet the show must go on.
Show must go on, right? Gotta work the guns. So
there's a difference between hurt and injured.
Right. And what is that?
So if you're injured, you can't play. But if you're hurt, you can still tough it out and play through.
I see. Oh,
hey, what's up, Bentley? How you doing, buddy?
Good.
Say hi to Ronnie. You're on camera. Fine.
You're on candid camera.
All right. Getting ready for bed?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, have a good night's sleep.
Good night, Daddy.
Yeah, good night. Love you.
See you, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah. Not gonna lie, this has got the shades of like a sparkling water kind of beverage, like a grapefruit almost.
It really does, yeah. It doesn't taste like an Abbey beer, I guess, compared to a lot of the other ones.
You can tell monks didn't make this one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Monks only make beer that puts hair on your chest and removes it from the middle of your head. So
Yeah, this is probably just like a starter for them. Only
yeah, exactly.
5.5%.
Yeah. Yeah, it is quite light. It's good, but it is very light.
I could see, of all the ones we've had so far, I could see someone drinking more of these, more than one of these.
Yeah. Well, 5.5, you actually can. The 10% ones still, once you stand up after too many of those, you're really feeling it.
After recording a podcast.
Yep, exactly. The spicy content towards the end of that is quite good.
Yeah.
Anyway,
when my filter starts to drop.
That's right. Okay, so we're recording this for this episode though. We've had a little bit of a hiatus here. I think, unfortunately, because of the this variant of COVID-19, the church had to close physically, so we're back to virtual church services. I think everything's been a little bit just flux, and because of the holiday break and everything, so a lot of it has kind of kept us on the sidelines here. Unfortunately, we can't record in our studio either. Well, studio. Okay, so it's time to talk about the news. So got a couple articles this week, spiritual news. I think the first one may win an award for one of the most tone deaf comments that will do the church no favors, but I think it's kind of a fun topic to get into. So I saw this over on CTV the other day. It says, opting for pets over children is selfish and takes away our humanity, says Pope Francis. So gist of the article being that it is our, moral obligation for husband and wife to have children and reproduce and grow the human race, and that when people choose pets over children, it's just a selfish act. And so this is in comment to a trend to more childless couples, families who maybe have one children and multiple pets, or anybody who basically just doesn't follow a certain lifestyle of having more children. And now it is, it does mention later in the article that one of the problems with this is there's lots of children in the world who need a good home, who and a loving family, who are available, through adoption, right? So they're in bad situations and they can be put in good situations, but families are choosing to not go through with the burden and responsibility of having children, and instead just choosing to, sort of pour that love that they might otherwise have for a child into an animal instead. I think that's sort of the argument that's being put forward. So I don't want to share my opinion yet, other than I said it's tone deaf, and I say that from the perspective of somebody who has one child and two pets, so fitting the mold of somebody who doesn't structure their family in the way that Pope Francis may approve of. But I'm sure my opinion. Yeah. What do you think?
How dare you have more pets than children? First of all, seems really out of left field, doesn't it?
A little bit, yep.
Seems a little bit manufactured, almost like a distraction from bigger issues like failing to apologize for residential schools in Canada and things like that.
Yeah.
Don't worry about this big thing. Don't worry about all the millions we promised and then didn't do. Don't worry about the fact that we haven't apologized and we're not planning to. Don't worry about the fact that we're dragging this out until everybody's dead, basically. All the survivors are dead. Let's talk about people who have pets instead of kids. So that's the first thing, very political bait and switch type thing, a false dichotomy, if you will. One thing that was interesting about the article, it didn't get the perspective of the people who are having pets and no children to say why they might be doing that. It's true that there's a growing number of people who are simply unable to have children. And adoption is no, silver bullet that's magically going to solve all these problems that are sort of alluded to, lots of children without loving homes. You can't adopt your way out of that. That's a lot of broken homes and violence and trauma and generational things of that nature. But then it's also another classic political move where you find this really tiny minority and you make them out to be these evil people, and then you get everybody else to rally around that sort of basic discrimination 101 kind of thing,
like attacking a straw man kind of thing.
Yeah, how many people do you know out there that are actively choosing to not have kids and have pets instead? I don't personally know anybody.
I can think of maybe one or two couples.
And they're like militant about not having kids, or is there more to it than that? And they're like, no, it's pets and no kids. That's it. Definitely pets. Like, we're pro pet and that's it. Like, who are these people?
Yeah, I can think of a couple different people that I know. One, I think it's just difficulty having children, and so they have pets instead. And the others, it's just a couple who never wanted children. It wasn't that they prefer pets over the children. It just wasn't something that either of them wanted in their relationship. And it never seemed that it was ever something that, say, one of them wanted and the other kind of just gave, or one didn't want and the other kind of just finally gave into it or whatever. It was just like, no, this is just who we are. And they're, not, I don't think, practicing Christians either, right? But so
of all the people that this one couple who may kind of sort of fall into this category.
Yeah.
Yeah, what'd you say? A straw man? What was the term?
Yeah, straw man, like attacking straw man, like creating a false argument, like a caricature of something, and then attacking that as if it represents the other side's position when it's not really at all what they were arguing in the first place.
Yeah. And I bet a lot of people the growing number of people don't want to have kids because the climate crisis is so bad, even though we're all still in denial. But some people don't feel that way, and they're choosing not to have kids to have a smaller footprint on the land, which is a very rational position that can be well reasoned and well argued. It's not some willful intent to like subvert God or anything like that, like the article seems to be making it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
But why this question? Was the Vatican really getting just like millions of letters from people demanding that they take a stance on people who don't have kids?
Yeah.
To me, it's just a bait and switch, because they're getting a lot of negative press right now in Canada, at least. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but right now, it's they're on basically in the midst of a crisis of confidence in Canada.
Well, I mean, I would say that part of what's happening, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but and this is going to dovetail in the second article, and a piece of news that we have on deck, is if Christian families are having less kids and more pets instead, so the family dynamic is, instead of like a husband and wife and 3 kids, it's husband, wife, 2 kids and a dog, or husband and wife, 1 child and a dog and a cat, or something like this, right? So there's like a 5-unit household in each case, but instead of 3 kids, it's less than that, it means there's less reproduction and therefore less practicing Christians being created. And so Christianity's demographic makeup sort of deteriorates over time as a result of that.
Mhm.
So I think it's a reflection of the fact that the church is certainly struggling to stay relevant and keep healthy numbers of new members, because Western countries, just the fertility rate is just way lower. And that is actually just an economic fact of any country that reaches a certain level of development. As female labor participation rates increase, fertility rates decline. And so, the sort of Western cultures, the predominantly Caucasian countries and stuff like this, where there's more practicing Christians, are seeing that, and that demographic makeup is changing. And so, so pets is part of that reality, I guess. I think that it's hard to have, over 3 kids, heck, over 1, and have 2, career engaged adults in the home. I don't know how the Pope feels like about, women's labor participation, for that matter. I don't know what their view is on that, but anyway.
It's probably not what many would hope it is.
Not super progressive.
Yeah. But that's another self-serving motivation, right? If we just say, oh, well, number of Christians is declining, so they're trying to get more Christians to have kids. Well, that's not really a holy motivation per se. It seems very self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
They probably somewhere in there, I don't know if it was in the article or not, but they would probably say somewhere in the rationale that it says in the Bible that we're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. But what happens when we stop being fruitful? What happens when we turn parasitic, I guess? Are we supposed to continue to multiply?
So, I mean, go ahead, sorry.
Well, the number one problem with the world right now is humans, basically. I mean, we're kind of destroying everything, and we've sort of passed, I think, the being fruitful to multiply sort of equation. Not that there is one. And so many people think that we need to maybe slow down, but then also another big factor here is you mentioned demographics. The baby boom after the post-war, and not to alienate any baby boomers out there, but we're top heavy with older people, and those things iron themselves out over time. But it was an unusually large surge of population in the 50s and the 60s, and now that all those babies are basically retired now, and so the carrying capacity there is a bit skewed, and the social programs that were designed just a few decades ago no longer supporting in the way that they were designed to, and so we've had to rely on intense immigration to sort of keep the population growing. But in my parents' generation, my mom had 9 kids, my dad had 10 kids in their families, and wasn't that long ago. So by the time my generation rolled around, our generation rolled around, the economics of the country completely turned around. Yep. And people could only afford to have so many kids. But then also in those days, you needed to have kids because you needed the labor. And so people were having just to survive, people were having big families. And then a lot of immigrant families that come over tend to be bigger families in that same kind of way, just to sort of, just to survive, I guess, economically, you need you're a bigger support network, so you're having more kids. But then our tastes have changed as well. We want more luxury and less ordinary, and that plays a role in there too. I mean, you can't have certain lifestyle that the modern day offers with a whole bunch of kids running around. It's sad to say, but going back to the article, yes, there's nothing better, I guess, there's nothing greater than having children, I guess. And I hate to say that because I know there's people out there that can't do that. But it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, and it's the best thing you'll ever do, I guess. And just couldn't imagine having 8, 9, 10 kids in this world that we have right now. It's just like, who can do it?
Yeah, it seems completely unfeasible. I mean, I know some families who've got 3. Rarely do you hear of them have 4. Beyond that, it's like what you're like astonished, But yeah, so you brought up another point. I want to, in the interest of time, like kind of get into the other article that we were looking at, which is it's on Global News. It's part of a series. Came out.
Sorry, before we do that, and we haven't been talking about this long. It just feels long because we've been talking for a long time now. But one last thing there. It's like demonizing pets unnecessarily, and
yeah.
Everyone will agree there are some people out there who just go way too over the top with providing for their pets.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what they're talking about. Like they're saying if you don't have children, you're less than human, basically. But pets are also God's creation, and pets are also capable of generating love between beings. And to just sort of dismiss all of that offhand, I think is pretty shallow and reckless, I guess.
Well, I mean, yeah, like I think of all the days where my pets put a smile on my face, that wouldn't have been there without them. And sure, like another child could do that too, for sure. But these things can coexist, and depending on how you set up your lifestyle, you might end up being a better person who can inject more positivity into the world in certain ways, just beyond pumping out children.
Right.
Because there's lots of people out there who pump out tons of kids who are, frankly, crappy personalities, so, and others who can't have kids who are wonderful people. Like it's so at the end of the day, really, it's about how do you make the world a better place with your actions and love others and be a positive force on the universe, whether you're having children or not. And I think giving a pet a loving home is no small thing, right? Yeah, pets aren't as much work as a child is, and I don't think it's as rewarding as a child. But on the other hand, I think they're just an important part of the family dynamic. And like you say, the economic circumstances make that kind of how people are adapting. It's like, well, it's freaking expensive to have a kid, right? I think it, estimates like over their lifetime, each child is like a $250,000 to $300,000 in costs.
Whoa.
Right. So, when you're just squeaking out the average household income and housing prices and everything are where they are, like that is tough to try to swallow an additional $300,000, right? Like I don't know what the cost of a pet is over its lifespan, but it's not that. So so there's a lot of things, that circumstances there, and so you can't make these comments in a complete vacuum.
I just think it was completely unnecessary to pit those two try to pit us against this very niche group of people who got no power to say anything back, no power
to fight back.
True. Well, so the other piece is related to this, and it's just article says gone by 2040, why some religions are declining in Canada faster than ever. And this isn't really just Canada. I mean, this is like a global thing. And it goes through some different stats, but essentially it says religiosity in Canada is at an all-time low. Recently released data from StatsCan showing only 68% of Canadians 15 or older now report having a religious affiliation. It's the first time that numbers dipped below 70% since StatsCan began tracking the data in 1985. And it goes through a bunch of other notes, but what it does say is it's important to note that this decline is not across the board. The number of Muslims, Sikhs, Buddhists, and Hindus is increasing. And StatCan predicts the number of Canadians reporting a non-Christian religious affiliation could double by the year 2036. So, we've talked many times on the podcast before about, the sort of steady decline of, Christianity and some of the failings of the Christian church to adapt to the times that we're in. And that said, I don't know enough about other religions to say whether they are having that same problem. Now, the circumstances of the countries that are, practicing these religions may be different. And so the context around what religion and church means to them is different compared to, societies that are more economically advanced. But I will say, just as an economist, when I read this, my first instinct was, well, when you look at like Christianity's share of religion, it's just a function of the fact that, well, immigration is coming from mostly from countries like China and India, the Middle East, and like just countries with high population growth rates who are migrating to countries like Canada, the United States, Europe, more developed countries. And so when the countries that have the high growth rates are different religions than the Christian countries, of course, those religions are going to go up and the share of Christianity is going to go down in those countries. That's just a math problem. It's not a problem. It's just a math reality. So I don't think that's necessarily an issue, but when you talk about religion in general, like of all religions, of people reporting having some affiliation, and it says religiosity is at an all-time low, that's another factor altogether.
Yeah, there's a lot there to weigh in on. We've talked about this on the pod before too. We're in the sort of depths of the process towards individualism as opposed to sort of communal understanding of oneself. We're in a time now where you're supposed to be able to do everything on your own. You don't need anybody else. We're all self-made and what have you. And so there's been a massive shift in how society is organized. And on top of that, you've brought in people from all over the world into one place, and they have very different cultures, different religions, different views, so on and so forth. But the economics of our world is very much geared towards this individualism as well too. So now, even though COVID's been going on for 2 years now, you still remember the rat race times where everybody would just go, get yours, go. There's never enough time to get enough for yourself. That's sort of all the messaging, or a lot of the messaging in the world pushes people down this sort of road of individualism. And at the same time, in our context, Christianity at large, whether Catholic or Protestant or whatever, has done a lot of bad stuff to people. over the last 100 years. And a lot of that's only come to light recently, but there's still a great reckoning to come over all of that.
Couldn't you say the same about other religions too?
I don't know them well enough to say, but humans are humans and they tend to do the same things wherever they are, whatever their situation is. But I'm not here to say that. But in the West here in Canada, our context, you can see that those broad strokes of history. I do think that there's a sort of point where which things sort of start to go back the other way. You know, we always see this throughout history too. You get one extreme followed by another extreme, and then the sort of balancing in the middle until another extreme presents itself, I guess. But I think people are really starting to see the limitations on this individuality. We haven't been cleansed of that way of thinking yet, probably because, at least not here in Canada, because we haven't had to suffer enough yet to change our attitudes, I guess. Self-centered posture. I do think that this crisis, though, has definitely shifted the way people see themselves in relationship to others. And there are also a lot of new religions that are being born all the time. For many people, science is a religion. For many people, anti-vaxxing is a religion. And they behave, hockey is a religion for some people.
Beliefs.
But they would never count that as a stat. But there are some people who live and breathe every decision they make revolves around those things, one way, shape, or form. And that's really what religion is about, the coming together around sort of an idea that's bigger than ourselves. Obviously, there's some nuance there and some differences, but we're in the depths of this highly individualistic time, which is necessarily going to hurt organizations of all types. It's not just the church, it's the bowling leagues, it's the the community center, it's what, like, there's an increasing fracturing of communities, I suppose, that's happening. It's not just the church. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that mentions in this, he's like a statistician, like a researcher for the Anglican Church. He says, this is a different guy. But he says the deep desire for connection has not gone away. In fact, through this recent time, the pandemic, it's actually accelerated, he would say. But in a traditional church like ours, or small group gatherings, we're hardwired for community. We're hardwired for spirituality. And I think that's probably true. But it takes time to realize that. And there's so many fancy devices out there to keep us entertained, to kind of keep the dopamine drip going all the time. And so you get addicted to this stuff, but it does leave you, like social media and everything, like it leaves you empty. It doesn't really give you any sense of community, no relationships or connection to others. I think the only thing that can really do that is going out of your way to help somebody, do something nice. Like, I'm at feeling my best when I'm, helping people. And I think that, like, when I feel anxiety, it's when I just start being all self-centered and thinking about how things are affecting the course of my life and the way I want it to go versus the way it could go, and getting anxious that it might throw some path that I've decided I want to be on, off course. And when I'm feeling those feelings, rather than confronting them by doing something good for somebody else, you can find it very easy to retreat into like your phone and distract yourself from all that
Right.
kind of stuff.
Right.
And
escapism, the new religion, is
exactly
98% of Canadians subscribe to escapism.
And so that's definitely, you know, a part of it. And I think that I don't know that if people have changed too fundamentally, like I think they still crave something. I mean, I think this is why, well, that's my opinion. They still crave something. And that's why I wanted to do the podcast in the first place with you is, okay, well, let's see if we can tap into that in some way. Maybe what we're presenting is part of that solution. You know, like I don't think that people necessarily need to go to a sanctuary to connect with their community. But I'd say even listening to us on a podcast, like it isn't going to do quite what they really need. It can help kind of like guide people, but ultimately you got to get out there in your community. And I think that's one of the things that I don't like about this pandemic is that it really has physically and socially distanced us from one another. And I think that on the one hand, it had this galvanizing force at the beginning of bringing us together around a common sort of and very unknown threat.
Mm-hmm.
But then later has created more sort of isolation and paranoia and whatnot. And so I think it's deteriorated certain bonds, and we have to get back to practicing how to be social people, like for the kids, and being stuck out of school and stuff. Like that's one of the big, most valuable parts about going to school is the social interaction elements of it,
Yeah.
And you can see that the kids' social skills really do deteriorate when they have too much time away from it. So,
but back to the article. Yeah, sorry, were you gonna say more there?
No, go ahead. Yeah, I was gonna just bring it back too. So,
oh yeah, so I think a new kind of reformation is required here, because the way the church has been built was specific to the circumstances that built it, and now it doesn't fit today anymore.
Mhm.
And so we need to, well, it's been a long process of uncoupling the church and central halls of power. That's something that's gone on over the last 50 years or so. And we can see clearly now at this point, 2022, that is impact, that disenfranchisement, I guess, has impacted numbers of people who go to church, because in the past there was all kinds of social pressures to make sure your butt was in that pew, whether you believed this, that, or the other thing or not. That's not there anymore. Like, it's pretty much a strictly volunteer basis. Like, if you want to go to church, it's up to you and you and your family, and that's about it. You're not getting these wider social pressures. Like a pastor in the past, he would, mainly it was he, would be visiting everybody and like letting them know, who the boss was and what was required of them and the commitments they needed to make and how their life was to be structured. But it's not like that anymore. And I think in a lot of ways it's a good thing, because as you can see, people are obsessed over numbers, right? Like the effectiveness or validity of a church is tied to the number of people that they can count. And that's so not what the gospel is about. It's so not what Jesus is about, what God's about, what the Holy Spirit's about. And so we kind of have to find that essence again. It can't just be about, well, how do we get more people to come to our place?
Well, it's all about the almighty dollar, right? More people to come and donate money.
But if people are energized and participating in ministry, and are energized by that, that's what I think is attractive to people. And so we're right in the midst of this great transformation. We've been talking about this now for a few years, even. A lot of us have said, like something's changing, but we don't quite know where it's going. And we're still watching it unfold. I'm not here to say I'm some oracle or whatever, but we do have to innovate. There's no question. We do have to break the whole thing down and start over. Let's go right back to the beginning. And this is kind of something I try to do, I guess, in my work. Forget what you heard. Let's start over. Let's go right back to the words and see what they say. And it's amazing how revolutionary that can be nowadays, because there's a million different translations of the Bible, and whatever color, whatever font, whatever you can imagine. There's Bibles enough to fill how many landfills? Who knows? And yet nobody's reading it. Online even. It's all online. And so when nobody's reading it, you can just say whatever you want, and there are no consequences really. But when you go back and you start from the very beginning, you're going to end up with a different perspective, I think. And we have to do that work to build whatever it is that's going to replace what is dying. The church that the article is talking about. And it's not the first time it's ever happened. It's not the last time. Like when the Reformation came, it's because so many people, they'd reached a critical mass of people who had had enough with the abusive practices of the church. And we're seeing that again here 500 years later, over the last century. The heinous crimes that the church has committed are, first of all, they don't want to apologize for them, which is ironic because the church is founded on confession and forgiveness. Jesus and John the Baptist are very strong on this. So when we see the powers that be acting a certain way, preaching a certain way, and they don't mesh, people are going to drift away from that. And especially as society has opened up, become more individual, more choice, more freedom of movement. Those trends are going to continue. But the gospel is not going to die. You can't kill God, even though Nietzsche tried his best. But each generation needs to find its own voice. And one of the interesting things in that article you shared was, kids grow up with their parents' faith, and then there comes a point where they need to break away from that and develop their own faith. And they need an opportunity to sort of shape the direction of whatever that looks like. And for people in congregations, that means handing the keys over to the next generation.
Yeah.
As soon as you're able to, you do it over time. It's not one thing that happens, but what are they interested in? What do they see? What do they hear? When they read the text, what are they talking about? What's going on in their life? Because we're not bringing back the church in 1962. I can promise you that. Whatever we do, it's going to look a lot different from that.
Yeah, it got missed somewhere. Like, and there's along the way, it's like, bring the kids in, but how do we transition it, right? So it becomes their faith.
Yeah, but don't let them touch anything, and don't let them break anything.
That's what I mean. Like,
that's kind of been the attitude in a lot of places.
Yeah, so it's kind of myopic in a way. Like, we want the kids there because we want the parents there. But there was not like a longer term thought is, how do we keep these kids engaged? And that's kind of the case with a lot of things, really, even businesses and stuff, right? Like they have the old way of doing things, the status quo, they stick to it, and then they become the blockbusters of the world,
Right.
Like, and church is the risks the same, becoming obsolete in the same way because they keep doing things the same way. I think it always really comes back to young people. But now that there is no young people in the church, like that opportunity is a little bit lost. Like, you got to work harder now to get them back.
Well, some people are better at it than others, I guess. But in times like these, there is a great yearning for these types of things. And I think, things will turn around somewhere down the road. Don't have my crystal ball. But it's funny how in life, and this happens over and over again, human is a curious species. We always become what we fought against. So early Christianity, and Christianity in general, is this very countercultural thrust, I guess, if you will. It's a countercultural statement. It's a countercultural story. Everything about it is what we least expect, and how God's expectations are so different from our expectations. But somewhere around in the 300s, Christianity became more and more popular, and because an emperor's mom was into it, it became the state religion. And ever since that time, so I guess in that sense, the church became what it fought against. It became this power holder and wielder in society, when it was always supposed to be this, go against the temptations of the world, like be different, deny yourself, those kinds of things. And it took 1,200 years or so. Well, I guess we could start getting into the Great Schism and this and that and the other thing. After many hundreds of years, skip forward to today, where Christianity ruled the world essentially up until, our lifetimes essentially. This decolonizing needs to happen. We're in the midst of this great decolonization. And the church works a lot better when it's on the margins, it's on the fringes, it's in the places where nobody wants to go, the places where we least expect to look. That's when it's was it zeitgeist? Is that a thing?
Yeah.
It's like in action. Otherwise, we're just sort of in between. We're in the slow death phase until Christianity can be freed from the church, I guess, if you will, in a sense.
Well, Ronnie, I think we should leave it at that, because we're coming out on 10 o'clock here. And
we didn't even rate these beers yet.
No, we still have to rate the beer. That's what I'm saying. So we got a little bit more homework to do here.
All
so what do you think? So on a scale of 1 to Martin Luther, St. Bernadus Wit, what are you saying?
In a vacuum, I'd probably rate it higher, but compared to what we've already had and my particular proclivities, I'm gonna and just to be a little bit cheeky too, I'm gonna rate it what its percent is.
The old 5.5 then. So Ronnie's giving this a 5.5. Yeah.
Very witty, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. The first sip of this I thought was quite good, but as I drank more of it, I was like hoping for more. Like refreshing first bit, but then after a while you're like, I could go for something a little bit more full bodied. So yeah, I think you're right. And again, this is a relative scale of Abbey beers, which are probably going to be on the upper end of compared to a lot of other non-Martin Luther approved beers. But yeah, I'm going to give the Wit, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. So I'm going to write those down somewhere, because we're going to have to put them on our board when we get back to the studio.
Yeah.
But that is all for tonight. So thank you for doing this virtual session. Hopefully we can get back into the studio sooner than later. And get back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Well, thank you, David. Thanks for spearheading this. Thanks for asking me. Yeah. And till next time.
All right. Peace out.
Peace.
All right. See ya.
See you.
Well, that was delightfully mediocre. At least the beer was good. For more Dave and Ronnie, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your content. And if you made it this far, you're morally obligated to donate to Peace Lutheran Church at the link in the description. Pastor Ronnie Smith, I'm DW. Peace be with you.